You're ruining the family image, so sit quietly and don't embarrass us. I am Kelsey Mitchell, a 32-year-old compliance director. I poured my entire life savings into buying my home, my only sanctuary. In one afternoon, my mother stole my identity and secretly mortgaged it to fund my sister's extravagant country club wedding. Keep your mouth shut or I'll manufacture a digital trail to strip your legal license, my future brother-in-law Preston threatened. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply reached into my coat pocket, touched my crumpled security clearance denial notice and walked away. Right as my mother raised her glass for the wedding toast, a federal agent walked in to handcuff Preston and serve her a fraud indictment, stripping their freedom in front of 200 elite guests. Here is how I did it. I know how isolating it feels when your family treats you like a resource instead of a person. Please drop your city and local time in the comments. I read every single one. Let's go back to the morning my security clearance was mysteriously denied. The heavy oak door of the private dining room shut behind me, muting the clinking champagne flutes inside. My mother Cynthia had insisted on taking the corner booth at the Oak Ridge Country Club to discuss the $50,000 floral deposit for my sister's rehearsal dinner. She didn't ask how my work was going. She didn't glance at my simple beige linen suit. Instead, she pushed the itemized catering invoice across the mahogany table and gestured toward the bottom line. Beside her, Preston adjusted his silk necktie with a thin, practiced smirk. He was an executive loan officer, the kind of man who treated every human interaction as an asset transfer. A director's salary at a top compliance firm means you can absorb this without blinking, Kelsey, he murmured, leaning back into the leather upholstery. Consider it your duty to the family name. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't attempt to explain that my firm conducted quarterly federal security audits. My right thumb smoothed the creased corner of the stiff envelope resting inside my blazer pocket. It was the official letter from the Office of Corporate Governance, stamped in dark red ink. My top-secret clearance had been flagged for an unresolved six-figure debt. I stepped out of the Oak Ridge Country Club into the damp evening air, driving straight to my office on the 14th floor of the Meridian Financial Tower. It was 8:45 on a Tuesday night. The floor was deserted, bathed in the pale amber glow of emergency exit signs. I logged into my encrypted terminal, pulling up my annual executive vetting file. For 6 years as senior compliance director, my record had been immaculate. 0 flags. 0 credit inquiries outside my primary mortgage and a credit score locked at 820. A quiet knock rattled the glass pane of my office door. David Vance, our chief security officer, stepped inside without setting down his leather briefcase. He pulled a yellow compliance folder from his arm and laid it flat on my desk. The board received the automated flag from the Department of Treasury at 5 o'clock. Kelsey, David said, his voice measured, devoid of hostility but rigid with professional distance. A $450,000 lien was attached to your primary residential deed 6 weeks ago. Because you hold top-secret clearance, the system treats an unreported line of credit as an immediate blackmail vulnerability. You have 72 hours to produce a verified satisfaction of judgment, or Human Resources will issue an executive suspension. 72 hours, I repeated calmly, keeping my posture straight and my hands folded on the desk. He nodded, once turned and let the heavy glass door click shut behind him. I didn't panic. I dragged my mouse across 3 separate credit bureau APIs, cross-referencing my social security number against the state property registry. There it was. An active second mortgage filed on June 14th with First Capital Commercial, $450,000. Disbursed in cash to an escrow entity called Apex Holdings, LLC. My fingers moved across the mechanical keyboard with disciplined rhythm. As a compliance auditor, I knew every backdoor loophole used by rogue underwriters. A standard consumer credit pull wouldn't show a second mortgage if the lender bypassed the National Reporting Clearinghouse by using a private equity bridge loan. That was the blind spot. The borrower had deliberately bypassed standard consumer credit bureaus by filing the lien directly against my county property title through a specialized commercial deed. It was a sophisticated maneuver designed to stay invisible on my routine personal credit alerts while legally tying up my home. I stared at the digitized signature on the notary page. It was a high-resolution scan of my own handwriting, copied stroke for stroke from the family trust agreement I had drafted for my parents 3 years ago. They had always called me cold whenever I insisted on reviewing contracts before signing them. They called my precision controlling, but it wasn't control. It was the only thing keeping us afloat, while they treated my stability as a free reservoir for their reckless vanity. The system timer on my screen began its cold digital countdown, 71 hours and 59 minutes remaining. The cash had been drawn, the lien was active, and my home was encumbered. To clear my name, I needed to trace the IP address and bank routing numbers of Apex Holdings LLC before the corporate governance board stripped my license. I reached for my security key token and initiated a deep forensic trace on the escrow transaction. At 1 a.m, the terminal screen cast a cold blue glow across my face. I opened the partner audit gateway for First Capital Commercial, the institution that had approved the private equity bridge loan. The public portal was locked down. A red warning banner flashed across the screen stating that file number 9921AC carried an active fraud restriction and could not be transmitted via email. Requesting direct access meant bypassing the institutional firewall using my personal senior compliance ID. If the audit board flagged this inquiry as a conflict of interest, my professional credentials would be suspended immediately. I did not hesitate. I plugged in my security token, typed my supervisor passkey, and authorized the access. The firewall cleared, revealing the digital loan jacket. The $450,000 deed of trust sat before me in crisp, high-resolution PDF pages. My credentials were now permanently embedded in the access log, a price I willingly paid to see the unredacted truth. I scrolled past the forged signature straight to the metadata tab, pulling the origin electronic signature logs. I expected to find an offshore proxy or a masked virtual private network used by professional identity thieves. Instead, the timestamp displayed a static IP address, 68.104.12.88. My hand stopped moving over the keyboard. I knew that IP address. Last November, during Thanksgiving dinner, my mother had complained that her internet connection was too slow to stream her social club galas. I had spent 3 hours sitting on her office floor configuring a high-speed mesh router for her, mapping the static IP gateway, and setting up the administrator security protocols myself. The digital loan application for $450,000 had been uploaded from the home office at my mother's estate on a Sunday afternoon at 2:15. I clicked on the underlying entity details for Apex Holdings LLC. Listed under the primary corporate officers were 2 authorized signatories, my father Gordon Mitchell and my future brother-in-law Preston Hayes. They hadn't even bothered to hide behind a third-party broker. They had sat in my mother's sunroom using the very network I had built for them to pledge my house as collateral for my sister's wedding. People who exploit family never operate alone. They rely on the silent compliance of the entire household to protect their comfort. My father had signed as the managing member while Preston had processed the underwriting docs through his brokerage connection. The $450,000 hadn't gone to a random bank account. The wire transfer record showed a direct disbursement to the country club's master escrow account. I stared at the names on the screen, my expression motionless. How could 2 men who shared my family name use my own home network to erase my sanctuary? The download progress bar reached 100%, and the master contract file opened across my high-resolution monitor in crisp PDF format. Page 1 was a 40-page deed of trust, issued under First Capital Commercial's high-yield private lending division. I zoomed in on page 34 straight to the electronic execution block. There, stamped in bright purple ink, was the official digital notarization, flanked by my printed legal name as the sole property owner. Right above it sat the forged signature, executed with meticulous, calculated precision. I scrolled down to the loan officer attestation page. Preston Hayes had signed his name with the practiced flourish of a senior mortgage broker who believed he was completely immune to professional oversight. He had used his licensed credentials to override standard identity verification protocols, manually checking the box marked Government Identification Verified in person. He knew the internal system shortcuts, and he had leveraged his brokerage access to quietly push the fraudulent application past the automated compliance filters. He was so confident in his ability to manipulate paperwork that he hadn't even bothered to spoof a third-party broker identification number. Then I opened Exhibit C, the itemized disbursement schedule, $450,000. The breakdown was documented down to the exact cent, exposing the hollow vanity behind my sister's upcoming event. $120,000 went straight to the Oak Ridge Country Club Master Grand Ballroom rental fee. $85,000 was allocated for custom floral installations and imported ice sculptures. $50,000 funded private charter flights for my sister Chloe's high society friends. $45,000 covered rare vintage champagne. And $150,000, the remaining balance, was transferred directly into Preston's personal real estate holding account as an underwriting broker fee. My phone vibrated against the dark walnut surface of my desk, the screen illuminated with a text notification from my mother Cynthia sent at 1:42 in the morning. Kelsey, remember your dress fitting is tomorrow at 2. Please make sure you pick something understated so you don't clash with Chloe's bridal party. I stared at the glowing blue text on my phone screen, a cold, heavy stillness washing over my chest. They had stripped away my sanctuary, stolen my life savings, and placed a federal execution order over my 6-year career, all to buy 24 hours of hollow prestige. They knew I was a senior compliance director. They knew an unreported debt would trigger an immediate top-secret clearance audit. They simply did not care. In their eyes, my entire purpose in life was to suffer quietly in the shadows so my sister could walk down a flower-strewn aisle. I held the bulletproof evidence. I had the exact paper trail proving identity theft, mortgage fraud, and bank embezzlement. As I pulled the metal flash drive from the USB port, the reality set in. My own mother and father had handed my career to Preston on a silver platter, perfectly comfortable with letting me face prison or poverty as long as the champagne kept flowing. I looked at the system clock on my workstation screen. It was 2:15 in the morning. The final electronic wire transfers to the vendors at Oak Ridge Country Club were scheduled to settle on Thursday afternoon at 4 o'clock. I pulled up my compliance administrative dashboard, opened the escrow intervention protocol, and placed my index finger over the mouse button. If they wanted to use my name to fund their grand delusion, they were about to learn what happened when the person they betrayed held the keys to the vault. I inserted my hardware security token into the workstation and opened the Financial Crimes Enforcement portal. Under Section 326 of the Federal Anti-Fraud Compliance Act, a senior compliance director holds the emergency authority to issue an administrative hold on escrow proceeds tied to flagged property deeds. My fingers moved across the mechanical keyboard with mechanical precision. I input the master loan file number, checked the legal disclaimer certifying suspected identity theft, and pressed the crimson button labeled Execute Emergency Escrow Hold. The screen blinked twice before a flashing red banner erupted across the dashboard: disbursement suspended. Escrow account blocked pending audit. The $450,000 financial pipeline nourishing their arrogance was officially dry. Within 4 seconds, the compliance server dispatched an automated transaction failure notice directly to the accounting office of the Oak Ridge Country Club. I pulled up the venue's vendor portal interface. A flashing amber warning appeared next to Chloe Mitchell's wedding file: pending wire payment unresolved, automated facility lockout initiated. Unless $450,000 in verified funds cleared by 12 o'clock on Thursday, the country club's rules dictated the immediate cancellation of the main ballroom catering services and floral installations. The entire staged event was 72 hours away from collapsing into public humiliation. I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out the crumpled security clearance denial notice. I unfolded the stiff paper against the desk, smoothing out the sharp creases with the side of my hand. For the first time in 3 days, the ticking clock belonged to them, not me. They wanted a grand showcase at my expense, but without my consent, the champagne would stay on the truck and the doors would remain locked. Then the terminal screen flashed orange. A piercing system chime echoed through the empty 14th floor office. Because an emergency administrative freeze alters an active real estate deed encumbrance, federal compliance bylaws mandate immediate electronic notification to all licensed underwriting officers attached to the original filing. I watched the automated audit trail generate in real time across my monitor. System log ID 4409 administrative hold dispatched to underwriting broker Preston Hayes. The system had executed my order, but it had also embedded my employee credential number directly into the incident report. My personal phone vibrated violently against the desk blotter. The caller ID displayed Preston's private mobile number. I didn't answer. I sat back in my leather chair watching the screen illuminate the dark room with his repeated calls. I had cut off their money, but the system had just handed Preston the exact confirmation he needed to strike back. My cell phone stopped vibrating, replaced 3 seconds later by an urgent document transfer alert on my encrypted corporate terminal screen. A file titled K. Mitchell, Ethics, Violation, Notice, PDF, dropped directly into my private inbox routed from First Capital Commercial's underwriting server. Attached to the notification was an incoming encrypted video conference request. I clicked the link. Preston's face filled the upper quadrant of my screen. He wasn't smiling with his usual polished charm. He sat in his executive office on the 20th floor, his silk tie loosened, leaning forward with his elbows propped on his mahogany desk. Behind him, the blue ambient light reflected off his framed state mortgage broker license. "You shouldn't have pressed that emergency freeze button," Kelsey Preston said, his voice dropping to a measured, venomous cadence. "Did you really think you were the only person who understood how compliance oversight works?" I kept my hands flat on the desk, my expression completely unreadable. "You forged my signature on a deed of trust, Preston. You committed bank fraud and identity theft. That carries a 15-year federal prison sentence." He let out a quiet, mocking laugh, leaning closer to the web camera while tapping a silver stylus against the glass desk blotter. "Open the file I just transferred to your desktop." I opened the attachment. Page 2 contained a meticulously engineered digital audit log. It displayed my personal laptop MAC address, an IP timestamp from 6 weeks ago, and a verified two-factor authentication hash code. According to these manufactured records, I had personally initiated the $450,000 second mortgage from my own workstation. The document claimed I had authorized Preston's brokerage to process the disbursement, received 30% of the yield in cash, and then executed a fake identity theft report to erase my debt when my private investments failed. "It's airtight," Preston murmured, his eyes locking onto mine through the lens. "I pulled your administrative credential hash from the local system backup you ran for your parents last autumn. If you submit that escrow freeze to the Department of Treasury tomorrow morning, this file lands straight on the desk of the State Ethics Commission." He paused, letting the silence stretch between us like an iron cable. "A pending fraud complaint containing verified credential hashes against a senior compliance director triggers an automatic mandatory license suspension. No hearing, no preliminary review. Effective within 2 hours of submission. You won't just lose your clearance, Kelsey. You'll be stripped of your legal compliance license, blacklisted from every financial firm in the country. And your house will be foreclosed to satisfy the default." "And my mother approved this?" I asked, my voice remaining steady despite the cold weight settling in my stomach. Preston shrugged, adjusting his cufflink. "Cynthia sat right beside me while I extracted your credential logs from the home server. She told me to make sure you didn't ruin Chloe's wedding. She said you were always far too selfish, and if losing your job is what it takes to teach you your place, then it's a price she is completely willing to let you pay." He had turned my own profession into a trap. Under state financial regulations, the Ethics Commission operated under a strict zero-tolerance mandate. The moment a verified fraud report was logged against an officer, the board was legally required to freeze their license pending a 12-month administrative tribunal. If I took his fabricated file directly to the police tonight, the cross-agency alert would instantly fire. My license would be revoked before sunrise, and First Capital would execute the immediate foreclosure clause on my home long before a federal prosecutor could examine the raw server logs. The system was designed to protect institutions, not victims, and Preston had weaponized that exact rigidity. I had his entire extortion playbook in my hands. I knew every detail of his lie and had confirmed my parents' active role in the conspiracy. Yet the very regulations I had spent 6 years enforcing now held a knife to my throat. "Unfreeze the escrow account by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning," Preston said, reaching for his mouse. "Let the country club wire clear. Or I hit send, and your career is over." The screen went black. The feed cut off, leaving only the blue glow of the fake audit logs on my monitor. At 5:15 Thursday morning, I accessed the administrative gateway of my mother's home mesh router. Because I had built the network from scratch, my master override key bypassed Preston's attempt to wipe the system logs. The raw, unedited packet captures revealed the exact technical anomaly. Preston had extracted my credential hash from an offline local backup drive on my mother's computer at 3:14 p.m. on Sunday. At that exact minute, my corporate keycard badge logs and high-definition security footage proved I was 15 miles away, chairing an executive audit committee meeting at the Meridian Tower. I compiled the raw router system logs, the unalterable ISP server data, my company's physical entry badge timestamps, and the forged mortgage application into a single cryptographic forensic package. At 6 o'clock, I transmitted the file directly to Special Agent Marcus Vance at the Federal Financial Crimes Division. By 7:30, the response arrived on my secure terminal. The evidence was bulletproof. A federal magistrate had signed an emergency arrest warrant for bank fraud, identity theft, and criminal extortion, along with a federal asset freezing order. Agent Vance confirmed his team would execute the warrant at precisely 6:30 p.m. right during the grand reception toast at the Oak Ridge Country Club. To keep Preston from realizing he had walked into a federal trap, I had to play his game until the exact moment the cuffs clicked. At 8:59 a.m., I logged into the compliance portal and temporarily lifted the administrative escrow hold, allowing the country club payment to clear. The price of complete justice was stepping into the enemy's den dressed as the obedient, defeated victim. I pulled my simple beige linen suit from the closet, smoothed down the lapels, and slipped the folded security clearance denial notice into my blazer pocket. When I arrived at the Oak Ridge Country Club at 2 o'clock, my mother greeted me with a cold, triumphant smile. She handed me a stack of satin place cards, ordering me to arrange them at the back tables near the noisy kitchen service doors so I wouldn't ruin the family aesthetic. Beside her, Preston leaned against the marble bar, raising his scotch glass in a silent, arrogant salute. I didn't flinch, nor did I utter a single word of defense. I quietly set the cards on the table, checked my wristwatch, and began counting down the final 4 hours until the red and blue lights arrived. At 6:30, crystal chandeliers illuminated 200 elite guests seated around the dance floor. My mother, Cynthia, stood at the podium with a silver microphone, raising her champagne glass to praise family devotion. Then the grand double doors burst open. Special Agent Marcus Vance marched into the ballroom, followed by 4 uniformed federal officers. Strobe lights from 3 police cruisers flashed blood red and cold blue through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Cynthia's smile froze mid-sentence. "This is a private event," she barked into the microphone, her voice squeaking. Agent Vance didn't pause. He walked straight to the head table and unrolled a certified document. "Cynthia and Gordon Mitchell, you are named in a federal mortgage fraud indictment. Preston Hayes, you are under arrest for felony extortion." Cynthia's fingers went limp. The silver microphone slipped from her grasp, crashing onto the floor with a screeching feedback pop. Her knees buckled. Her face turned paper white as my father reached to hold her up. Preston jumped backward, knocking his chair onto the floor. "I'm a licensed broker." 2 agents shoved him face down against the white tablecloth. The steel handcuffs clicked closed before 200 silent guests. I stood motionless in the back, watching them fall. I walked out into the cool, damp night air of the private parking lot. The distant red and blue strobe lights faded into the highway traffic, leaving only the quiet hum of the overhead halogen lamps. Behind me, the Oak Ridge Country Club ballroom stood dark and deserted, its grand double doors left wide open to the empty night. The mortgage lien was void, my home was secure, and my 6-year compliance record was clean on every federal database. I stood alone beside the driver's side door of my car. I reached deep into my blazer pocket, my thumb feeling the rough edges of the paper I had carried for 6 days. I pulled out the crumpled security clearance denial notice. I laid the stiff envelope across the cool metal hood of my sedan, carefully smoothing out every sharp crease with the palm of my hand under the pale amber streetlight. I looked at my legal name printed at the top, stamped with the dark red ink of an unresolved debt. I did not bend down to look. I did not blink, nor did I reach up to wipe my cheeks. I tore the document straight down the middle, folded the halves, and ripped them into 4 clean squares. I tossed the pieces into the iron drain by the curb, watching them sink into the dark runoff below. I stepped into my car, pulled the heavy door shut, and started the engine. I pulled out onto the quiet highway without glancing back in the rearview mirror once. Loyalty is not a weapon you can use to force someone to finance your delusions. For years, I believed that being the reliable one meant absorbing every impact, swallowing every insult, and quietly bankrolling the grand illusions of people who only loved the convenience of what I provided. I mistook their endless appetite for genuine need, and I mistook my own endurance for virtue. But family is not a lifelong debt draft where one child is chosen to be the sacrificial martyr while others feast on a performative stage. When toxic entitlement wears the cloak of blood relation, it demands complete surrender under the guise of unity. They tell you that setting a boundary is a betrayal, that protecting your own sanity is selfish, and that your duty is to sit quietly in the corner so their fragile, vanity-driven lives don't shatter under the cold light of reality. But real devotion is built on mutual respect and truth, not on extortion disguised as affection. True loyalty honors your sanctuary. It does not turn your hard-earned security into collateral for someone else's social theater. It takes a devastating moment of clarity to realize that you cannot buy love from people who view you as a financial engine rather than a human being. You cannot negotiate with a household that treats your stability as a free commodity to be harvested whenever their pride demands a boost. The moment they require you to burn down your own life just to keep their facade warm, the obligation ends. You do not owe anyone the key to your home, the badge of your career, or the quiet ruin of your peace. I used to fear the silence that comes with walking away, terrified of the empty spaces left behind when you sever ties with the only bloodline you've ever known. But standing in this quiet parking lot listening to the steady hum of the night air, I realized that silence is not emptiness, it is freedom. It is clean, spacious, and entirely mine. Let them call me cold. Let them tell their rewritten stories about the ungrateful daughter who refused to play her assigned role in their script. I will no longer pay protection money to buy a temporary truce with people who were always willing to sacrifice me. Justice can clear a property title and restore a legal license on paper, but only your own firm refusal can liberate you from the trap of misplaced duty. You were never broken and you were never wrong for wanting a life of your own. You were simply paying for a seat at a table that was built to exclude you.